Our speaker this morning is Nalini Nadkarni, who is getting the WINGS Lifetime Achievement Award. Nalini is known as the Queen of the Forest Canopy. For 3 decades, she has used mountain climbing techniques, construction cranes, and hot air balloons to explore life in the treetops of Costa Rica and the Pacific Northwest, documenting biota that are rarely or never seen on the forest floor. She also studies the effect of forest fragmentation on biodiversity and has published over 110 scientific articles and 3 scholarly books. She is a professor of biology at the University of Utah, and her research has been supported by over 40 grants from the National Science Foundation and the National Geographic Society. Nadkarni is also a passionate communicator about nature to people in all walks of life, innovating science engagement programs that bring together radically different cultures of academic science and groups such as faith-based organizations, urban youth, modern dancers, and rap singers. She initiated programs to bring science education, ecological restoration projects, and nature imagery to incarcerated men and women in the United States. Nadkarni is a 3-time speaker at the TED Conference. Her recent awards include the AAAS Award for Public Engagement, the Archie Carr Medal for Conservation, and the William Julius Wilson Award for Achievement in Social Justice. With great pleasure, I welcome her up here to speak to all of us.
Wow. Today's fantastic awards really provide us all with the opportunity to reflect on our own lives, where we started, what shaped us, what we've done, and what is yet to do to walk that line between despair and hope to help save our planet. The poet, Rabindranath Tagore, wrote this wonderful little poem, "The tapestry of life's story is woven with the threads of life's ties, ever joining and breaking." And I think our lives and the life of the earth are like tapestries. They're complex, they're strong, they're fragile, they're useful, and they're beautiful. These are my parents, who formed the loom in which I was raised. My dad was from India, a Hindu, a cancer researcher. My mother was an Orthodox Jew from Brooklyn, New York, and she was a linguist. So we had a big family. It was rather chaotic and mixed up. And so as a kid, I loved to climb trees. That was me at about 6 years old. They were really my world. I felt their strength, their protection, their wisdom. And when I was a kid, I vowed that I would one day grow up to protect them. And so trees really became the thread that has been woven throughout my life. The word tree is actually derived from the Old English word troth, which means truth. That is an entity with a strong trunk, that is deeply rooted, and that holds aloft something that sweeps the sky. And I chose my profession to climb into the forest canopy. I wanted to explore this previously unknown world, the forest canopy, which was called at that time the last biotic frontier. So for the last 3 decades, I've been climbing trees on 4 continents. I use mountain climbing techniques, canopy walkways, hot air balloons, and construction cranes. This is from a National Geographic video called Heroes of the High Frontier. This is my favorite tree, Figueroa, where I've been studying for 35 years in Monteverde, Costa Rica, moving from the damp understory up to the sunlit sky of the forest canopy. Well, how many of you out there would like to join my thread of studying the forest canopy? I think it would be great. When you get up into the forest canopy, if I were to take you up there, you would see this enormous diversity of plants and of animals that are never seen on the forest floor, creating really in itself the tapestry of the forest canopy. But one day, about 10 years ago, I was in a treetop in Monteverde, and I heard the sound of a chainsaw. And I realized that even within this protected reserve, that we were not invulnerable from the human activities that were going on there. And so I recognize that human activities are tearing that forest, the tapestry of the forest. And I felt that the best way for me to help repair it was to take my understanding of the ecological values of trees and to find common ground with people who hold other values of trees, recreational values, aesthetic values, spiritual values. That is, to listen rather than to insist, to align and exchange with groups that might be far from academia. How to inspire, for example, a little girl growing up in New York City where there are very few trees to climb, to think about climbing trees, to value them, to understand them with her life. And my answer to this was to create Treetop Barbie. To use the icon that we have of Barbie, I made, along with this, we actually approached Mattel to see whether they would be interested in this, and they said no, surprisingly. And so we started buying used Barbies, creating little costumes for her, and also a little booklet that goes along with her about canopy plants and animals so that little girls can aspire to be treetop biologists also. We have tried marketing Ground Support Ken, but unfortunately that just hasn't taken off the way Treetop Barbie has. So with that sort of weaving through of this recreational, this fun toy, and this iconic symbol of little girls, trying to weave in the ecological threads of the importance of trees, I'd like to share with you what we've done in terms of weaving three other threads, that is, three other values, types of values in with the ecological threads to create a tapestry of conservation. So we'll talk about aesthetic values, spiritual values, and finally social justice values. Well, really, associating aesthetic values with trees and forests is dead easy, and my response to this was to sort of gather the power that artists and musicians have to observe, to perceive, and to communicate what they see as the aesthetic values of trees and mingle them in with the ecological values of trees. Our rap singer, Duke Brady there, was really one of the most compelling voices for forest conservation. And so I used this idea to try to knit in urban youth, typically a very difficult group to involve, especially as a middle-aged scientist. There's not a lot I have in common with urban youth or for them to look to me for information. But this rap singer that I engaged, named Caution, was a true hero to these urban youth. And so Caution came out with biologists and tree biologists to urban parks, started singing rap songs. The kids started making their own song. And this resulted in a CD that they could take back to their family and their friends to describe their values of the forest trees that they saw and that they encountered. Well, fashion is definitely what I would call sort of applied aesthetics, and I think that this could be a very powerful way to convey the aesthetics and the importance really about the way that we identify and present ourselves to others. It was very evident by looking at all of you wonderfully clothed women and men that you really thought about this morning what you were going to wear to project whom you wanted to be during this amazing event. And so I've been trying to think about how we can link fashion with ecology and conservation. This is kind of an odd thing for field ecologists to do because we're not well known for our fashion sense. However, what I have found, and just looking around this room, I counted 8 women in this room who have some kind of nature imagery on them. And maybe during the break you can take a look around and find them. However, they are not biologically correct. And therefore, what I've done is to take images, true images of real plants, in this case Piper auritum, which grows in the canopy of the Monteverde cloud forest, the same family as the black pepper that you put on your scrambled eggs this morning, printed on fabric, and work with fashion designers to make this attractive jacket that you see me wearing here. This comes with a hang tang with information about this plant. And so that, say, if Lori Weissman, my dear friend, who's here, said, "Nalini, nice jacket," I could say, well, this is actually Piper auritum. It grows in the canopy of Monteverde, and it's related to the black pepper that you put on your scrambled eggs this morning. So truly, although we laugh about this, it means that really every individual can become a vector for conservation through whatever medium he or she might find important. These are just another couple of clothes for women that we've designed. Women wearing water uptake, describing water uptake on leaves. Penguins here can start a conversation about global climate change and the disappearance of our ice sheets in the South Pole. There are clothes for men as well. This is a researcher, Seth Bigelow, who studies the tapir in Costa Rica. We made a plant-animal combination for this handsome shirt. And when Seth decides to go formal, he can wear this geological tie. Those are the possibilities that we have for fashion. I just want to say that being in New York City, I'm really excited about the possibility of making contacts with people who know a lot about the fashion world. Being an ecologist in Salt Lake City, Utah does not give me a lot of contacts. So if you know of anybody who might be interested in helping me out with this enterprise, I'd love to hear from you. Well, spiritual values are, of course, very important. Over 80% of the world's population self-identifies as being religious, but only 30% self-identify as being environmentalists. And so the approach I took with this was to go to the authorities of the world religions themselves. I read the Bible, the Quran, the Talmud, the Book of Mormon, of course being in Utah, and found verses that refer to trees or forests. For instance, Jesus was a carpenter, a worker of wood. Jews have a wonderful celebration, Tu B'Shavat, which celebrates the new year of the trees. Buddha, after all, found enlightenment underneath a tree. And so I put all of these references together to create a sermon called Trees and Spirituality. I began knocking on doors of churches and synagogues and temples and offered to give a sermon from the pulpit or the bima of this church, that is the voice of authority, coming to them not as a scientist shoving scientific facts down their throat, but saying, I am so curious to think about what your holy scriptures say about trees. I would like to learn about that, and let me tell you about what I found out from other world religions. So there was never a conflict between evolution versus creationism. Rather, people would raise their hand and say, you forgot about this hymn we sing about trees, or could you come with us to the tree planting that we do next Sunday to celebrate and to protect the things that God created? So I found there was a lot of common ground. There was a lot of commonality in terms of understanding and protecting trees and nature in the world of religion. The final thread that I'd like to work through is about social justice values and how we might be able to put those together with ecology. I figured that since prisoners and the officers and administrators that take care of prisoners are really in a world that is bereft of nature, bereft of science education, that might be something that they value. So I started in Washington State in 2003, a very small-scale prison program, science and prison program. I began giving lectures in prisons. I brought my scientific colleagues. We began a monthly lecture series. We also initiated a number of collaborations with conservation groups in which we trained the inmates to raise rare and endangered species like the Oregon spotted frog. They began to raise honey and learned about beekeeping. They started raising rare prairie plants for the Nature Conservancy. And began organic gardening. And all of these gave them a sense not only of the joy and the fantasticness of working with nature, but also a sense that they were capable of nurturing not only the plants and animals that they were raising, but perhaps themselves. It also gave them a sense of contribution, that even though they are incarcerated, even though they are kept away from nature and from society, they too had a contribution to make to our earth. Of course, I could not get to the men and women who are in solitary confinement because of high security purposes. We couldn't bring lectures. We couldn't bring plant and animal populations to them. And so I decided that perhaps videos of nature imagery might be the next best thing. So we worked with a supermax prison in Oregon State to bring nature videos to men who are in solitary confinement. We showed these videos during their regular exercise time, that's just 1 hour a day. And over a year, what we found was that after the men who watched these nature videos committed 26% fewer violent infractions than those that did not watch videos on the same cell block. So this then is information that allows not just the inmates, but also the prison officers, the guards who have constant contact with them, and the administrators, that in fact nature does have a value, even in the darkest parts of our incarceration system. So, coming back to this wonderful poem, the Tapestry of Life story is woven with the threads of life ties, ever joining and breaking. I guess I have to say that when I read this, I think, oh, how wonderful. I've lived and been blessed with this life that has allowed me to weave all of these threads of the conservation tapestry together. But I also know that word breaking. That breaking does happen. And in fact, on July 3rd, 2015, an important thread, my climbing rope, broke. And I fell 50 feet like a silent sack of sand to the forest floor. I sustained really life-threatening injuries of a broken neck, 5 exploded vertebrae, a broken pelvis, a broken fibula, lacerated lung, a lost spleen, and traumatic brain injury. But thanks to the great support that I've had from my family and friends, great medical support, I think I'm really back and really fully recovered. I just came back from Costa Rica after climbing trees again, and so I feel very grateful that I'm back physically. But psychologically, I have changed. Until my fall, life for me was really riding this bright red arrow, knowing that I was going to fulfill that vow that I made when I was little and to do conservation in any way that I could. But after that fall, I began realizing that, in fact, I wasn't quite sure. Life could be very short. I might have 30 years left to do this, I might have 30 days to do it, I might only have 30 minutes. And so I began really questioning this bright red arrow, which formally had given me the next job, the next project, the next proposal, the next paper, the next prize. And I found that over the last 2 years since that fall, that bright red arrow has been fading. And in fact, I'm kind of in a place where there's no arrow left at all. But I don't really see this stage as something negative. I'm really, I think, in a state that's neither disturbed, I'm not in a hospital bed, but I'm not back to the bright red arrow. I'm really at a third state. I don't see this as a dark space or a dark state. Rather, I'm trying to see it, and I think I am seeing it as what I call a portal to the new. I might find other threads to weave into my life. I might, in fact, find another loom that I can jump into. And I think that this is not just my story. I think all of us experience disturbances. Every person, every institution, and every spot on this earth. Ropes fail. Lightning flashes. Cars crash. The stock market crashes. Wildfires rage. Wars wage. Traffic snarls. Refugees flee. Parents separate. Dancers stumble. A lump is found. A child is lost. As we move to recover, collectively, individually, institutionally, and earthwise, I think we never really do return to that original state. Instead, we come to this third state that isn't the original nor the disturbed, but it's something different. It's neither worse nor better. It's just different, a place that might be a portal to the new. And we see many people now, here in this room, here around our planet, who create and repair the torn tapestry of our lives and of our planet in bold new ways. This moves me from that area of despair towards the area of hope. And I'd like to really ask, who weaves this tapestry of conservation? Well, we know that I've shown you some of the entities that have woven it, Barbie, the inmates, fashionistas, and rap singers. I think also that I have been inspired by many women conservationists and people who have inspired me to do conservation. Wangari Maathai, Rachel Carson, of course, Dorchester Taylor, who woke us up to the fact that there were not very many minorities working in conservation, and Joan Baez, one of my musical heroes who has actually used her voice for environmental and social justice purposes. But I think there are also people here who have woven their threads into this tapestry of conservation. Yael and Maud, who's on the board, and all of the fellows that I just heard, and all of you who have contributed by your presence, by your funds, and by your spirit to the mission of the WINGS WorldQuest, which I think is really synonymous with what we've all been talking about, and that is trying to help nature, trying to help ourselves, to move to a third state. We'll never be original, but it's a third state which we occupy now and from which we can move forward. So I think together we're weaving a tapestry that restores ourselves and our earth. Each of us, with our individual threads, is contributing to troth, to truth, to that entity which has a strong trunk, which is deeply rooted, and which holds aloft something that sweeps the sky. Thank you.
I think we have time for a question or two if anyone has one before we break.
Uh-oh.
All right, here we go.
What are you doing right now? Right now? Well, right now, I'm going to spend a couple of days in New York City talking to fashion people because I really do not know anything about the fashion industry. I mean, this is an idea. I have about 20 outfits that I've created with a designer and a tailor. But it's really as if, a fashion designer came to my lab and said, I really want to become an ecologist. I've got a great idea about forest ecology. And they would have no idea about how to write a grant, how to get graduate students, and so forth. So right now, I'm really focusing on some of the things that I can do, the next steps I might take in terms of moving forward this idea. The other thing that I'm working on, I sort of have parallel things going on, is we're just starting to work with juvenile offenders with our prison project. We've entirely worked with adult offenders in state prisons and county jails, and now we've been given an opportunity by the Juvenile Justice Service in Utah to bring our science lectures and our conservation projects to youth in secured housing. So that's something that we really have to learn about. Obviously, youth are different than adults, but I think there's many things in common that we have learned about in the prison system that we can apply to those youth and hopefully steer them away from moving into that world of adult incarceration through the power of science education and working with nature. Well, I think the question was how can we engage the entities that are involved with deforestation? And I think that is a really big, hard question because deforestation isn't the logging company. It's not the person with a chainsaw. It's not even the giant corporations that promote or the government policies that promote that. I think it's really us and our overconsumption, our not being aware of what's going on. So at the very simplest, I think, to answer your question, I would say we need to inform ourselves and motivate ourselves to use less, to be aware of what's going on. There are also policies that come up, and you could write or join the Union of Concerned Scientists, which have regular announcements about policies that come up that concern environmental issues. So then you can take the action of writing to a congressman or a senator. I would also encourage you to go visit tropical countries and any country that's forested where this is going on to get a sense of what that environment is, what the local people are doing and can do, and how you might help with that. Thanks.